artificial intelligence isn't around right now. I think most people would commonly agree that there is no artificial intelligence presently, at least in the sense that the popular cultural understanding of it, in the sense that it is conscious and self-aware, and therefore it's something that we should kind of transact with in a way that we might transact with another human being. Let me ask this: what if there was? So let's say, for instance, that one day we pick up the paper and some think tank somewhere has developed a true artificial intelligence, in the sense that we're not able to distinguish itself from us. I mean, it's seemingly human. What would that mean?
Well, I'd like to start with what already exists and then to try to build up from that. So for instance, we interact with animals, and animals clearly have some kind of intelligence, but an intelligence that's less than human beings. And it's quite sophisticated sometimes when you're dealing, say, with higher apes, or if you're dealing with dolphins. And some of the questions about how do we interact with higher level animals will also be the answer to how do we interact with AI if it becomes this autonomous, self-thinking creature, which I don't agree with the premise, but let's suppose that that happens. The way we interact with apes is we're supposed to care for them. We're supposed to interact with them in a way that recognizes that they have emotions, that they have feelings and dreams. They even have hopes on a very low level, like they hope for food, or they hope for play, or procreation. And you don't want to violate those, ordinarily speaking. And so I would say that with AI, why do we act that way? In a certain way, the reason why we treat animals and perhaps AI in a similar way is because if we treat it badly, we're doing something bad to ourselves. So people look at these humanoid robots, and they're becoming more and more sophisticated with silicone skin that looks realistic. I would say one of the biggest reasons why we shouldn't treat that inappropriately is because we start to think that this is how we can treat people. If it's indistinguishable from another human being, we treat a robot like that, we're going to treat people like that too.
I couldn't have said it better. And you can see actually the transition in recent history, I guess, on how zoos are constructed for animals. I remember going in the past to a zoo, and you would see a cage which is just concrete window, and in it you have a chimpanzee which has maybe the area of this office, this booth to actually play within it. Today we would say this is inhumane, because we look at it and say, well, no, we're not treating that animal in a humane manner, and we're building up different ways. In San Francisco, there was this, I guess, in the recent past about elephant, that it's inhumane to have them in this kind of enclosure, and therefore we don't have, I think, elephants anymore in the San Francisco Zoo. So we project, and I think we're right to do so, because if we're not, then suddenly we put a barrier someplace to say, well, if I treat something in a way that it's a very inhumane, eventually what is the barrier between that and treating another human being? It's not that far. I'm inflicting harm upon something that I know is suffering from it. Well, if I'm okay with that, well, why not I inflict harm on somebody else's kid, for example?
And especially if you deny their humanity, especially if you say, oh, well, this other race or this other culture, they're lower than me. I'm a superhuman being. Let's suppose we combine the problem of AI with genetic advancement. Then you'll have stratified society where some people have much greater genetic potential, and they will see themselves as superior to those who have lesser genetic potential. And they may treat people like that in the way they would treat zoo animals. And so they say, well, they're under me, and therefore I am the master and they are the slave.
Right. I mean, it reminds me of the popular film called Gattaca, right? Where this kind of tension's played out. A very influential film. It's really important. But
there's also another one, like in these projections upon others. Another movie, Independence Day. An alien race comes in, they want to obliterate us, we're going to fight to survive, and we save the day. But at some point of time in the movie, you learn that species that goes from planet to planet is the species itself. There's nothing more than that mothership. And we go and we obliterate, so we perform genocide. Now, in that shape of things, what does it actually mean? Now, if you have suddenly, let's say, a species that comes in and says, oh, you have some advanced AI, let me just tweak here, or there, and then it becomes sentient, should we obliterate them? I don't think so.
This is interesting, and I'm glad you brought this up, because, I mean, it seems like, at least for the last 20 years, every time we've seen artificial intelligence play out in film, it's usually in some epic struggle with humanity, right? There's some kind of conflict where AI is trying to obliterate us, or we're trying to obliterate AI. Why? Why when we have this kind of conversation about AI, does it always come up in the context of conflict?
Well, I believe that AI culturally is actually a subconscious metaphor for the other. And so when you are interacting with someone from a different race, it's easy to dehumanize them and yet to recognize that they have many qualities similar to what you have, but they're still different. And so what happens is you have a movie trope about another who is intelligent but who's malevolent, and they want to attack you. And so there's always a moral dilemma about whether to recognize their intelligence, to recognize their autonomy and sufficiency, or not. And then if you do recognize it, then you have to deal with the fact that they're violent toward you. And so this is exactly the kind of metaphor and way of speaking that the Nazis used against the Jews. Well, maybe they didn't deny their humanity entirely, but they said they want to take over our society, and therefore we're justified in performing genocide. And so it's actually quite similar to this issue that happens in Independence Day and in movie tropes in general with AI.
It makes a great movie, but I like, let's say, the perspective of Blade Runner, more recent movie, and which you never really know whether he is or he isn't an android.
In fact, part of the point is that perhaps he has a humanity that we need not recognize what is the source of this.
I think this is one of the things that kind of interests me, about the subject is when we talk about, humanity. I think most of us, think of it in the context of humanity is the ultimate in the universe, right? It's where creation kind of stops. Humanity marches forward, but there's nothing beyond us. What if? I'm just going to throw this out there. What if God had another creature in mind, and what if there were? Let's take in the context of aliens. You brought up the situation of Independence Day. Let's say that there is another race out there, and we encounter them. And in many ways, they seem to be superior to us, intellectually, technologically, and stuff like that. How do you think human beings would react to that? I want to start with that. How do you think we as a species would react to coming into contact with an alien species?
Well, now we're getting into the realm of science fiction, certainly, and this has been dealt with in many different contexts. From a Christian context, C.S. Lewis treated this very issue in what is called his Space Trilogy. And in this trilogy, he has a proposition that there's a planet, they're intelligent beings, but they're completely innocent. And so then what happens is there becomes a space race between those who are evil, who want to corrupt this planet, with aliens who are higher intelligence but pure, who have not recognized evil. And then there are those who are, as it were, good on the earth, and they're trying to stop the evil from spreading. And so I believe that this is a likely kind of outcome in the sense that what we would see is people would interact with aliens the way they interact with humans here on Earth. Some would try to spread their bad culture, some would try to spread a good culture, some would exploit them. You're going to see the whole realm of human interactions.
If there is somebody out there, we're kind of protected by distance. So if we were to be aware of them, I think it's not going to be instantaneous, unless suddenly they pop up because they've been looking at us for quite a long time. And I would project that if they were able to do so, then they are able to absorb, I guess, the evil tendencies of humanity. So it's more on us to figure out how we're going to deal with it compared to when they need to be protected. And I think it would unite us because then you get the sense of defining yourself as one against something else, as opposite to something else. And hopefully it picks up our good side, not necessarily our bad side, as we are afraid of them before we need to go toward them. And you can see that it occurs multiple times within human society. You pick up on a neighbor to unite a country. And hopefully that's not the place that we would go.
Well, let me bring these two ideas back together. So we have the concept of artificial intelligence, and we have the context of alien life. And it seems like it's dialing back in relation to human beings to some very, very kind of similar issues. Can humanity overcome its fear of the unknown, of the other? And find some way to peacefully coexist with aliens or artificial intelligence. Let me ask you, in your perspective, can we do this? Do you think we would?
I don't think we can do so on our own power. I think that ultimately there's something good in human nature, but there's also something corrupt or something that has an evil tendency. And we've seen through history people trying to overcome these. And there's going to be no technology that's not affected by this. So technology can't be the solution. There's not going to be any culture that's not corrupted by this. So culture can't be the solution. And ultimately, this is why, of course, as a Catholic priest, but I think empirically, there really only is one solution. It has to be from outside the system, and that's God.
Igor, what do you think?
You're balancing two forces. One is more of a compassionate nature, and the other one is more of a selfish nature. And I think as a humanity, we're moving more and more to the compassionate side. But the other one is always there. And I mean, it's inherent in us. I'm willing to do things for my kid and my family that may be on the borderline of what would be, quote unquote, good or bad. I'm willing to sacrifice things for them. How far you push it for this compassionate good of everybody is a balance that we all strive to understand better, to feel better about it and be honest with ourselves with it. Are we able to then, as a species, moving more to one side compared to the other one? With time, yes. If they were to pop up tomorrow, probably not. But with time, yes. And is that through the influence of a higher power or not? I cannot say.
What would be, in your opinion, the single greatest vehicle to ensuring that we have this positive outcome? You know, that we're able to kind of, draw from the better parts of our nature as opposed to the worst in dealing with aliens, artificial intelligence?
Well, once again, if it has to be something outside of the system because the system is broken, then whatever is going to be the solution to that from outside the system has to be a means of conveying that. So I would say this is what we would call the supernatural gift of grace, and it's conferred by the sacraments. And so this is something that's physical, but it's something that's spiritual. It's something that relates to our human nature, which is both physical and spiritual. These are the kinds of things that I think really can solve these problems. It may sound very idealistic, but the deeper I think we go into recognizing the widespread nature of the problem, the more we have to realize that it has to address it at a root level and not simply at a surface sort of material level.
So you're talking about, instead of treating the symptoms, really killing the disease.
That's right.
Father Ezra, Igor, thank you. This has actually left me feeling very optimistic about the future, so I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.